And we'll resume where we left off, which was with deer. And let's hear what we've got going on with deer.
Well, it's kind of a mixed bag. We have some bright spots, in particular Area 4 in Pershing County, Area 15 in Lander County, Area 6 in Western Elko County, Area 7, Area 12, Area 13. We had good surveys in all those areas. Sample size way up. We're maintaining good hunter success, good percent 4-point or better. Survey sample sizes are at or in some cases above what we saw in the supposed peak in '88. On the downside, we still have some areas that are kind of a mystery to us. Area 14, Eureka County. We continue to kind of struggle with sample size and animals in that area. We're seeing some issues of concern in Area 11 also. So we kind of have a mixed bag out there. We did see a pretty good increase in recruitment this year, spring fawn ratios. Statewide, it was up to 34. Just off the long-term average of 35 and up from 27 last year. That's definitely encouraging, especially given some of the snow loads that we had out in the eastern part of the state that knocked things back in that area. Definitely put us in a growth mode. We've had good moisture the last couple springs, and we're actually realizing some of the benefit of carrying so many old age bucks in our population. We're seeing a lot of good antler quality. I guess that about sums it up. We're maintaining high hunter success, and our percent 4-point or better is also very high. We were right at about 40% for statewide hunter success, and we dropped from an all-time high in percent 4-point or better last year at, I believe it was 46%. I think we dropped to about 42%. But what we typically see between the relationship between hunter success and percent 4-point or better are often inversely related. In a year where you have a lot of recruitment, there's a lot of young bucks to harvest. It drives up the hunter success, but it similarly drives down the percent 4-point or better because there's a lot of young bucks. So last year, where we had 27 fawns recruited in last spring, or the year before where we were low, we didn't have a lot of young bucks in the population, so hunter success dropped, but we had an all-time high percent 4-point or better because the proportion of the bucks in the population available for harvest were skewed towards the older age class animals. So a lot of times you see an inverse relationship between those two.
Okay. Fair enough. And just going over the basic categories here. The junior hunt looks like recommendations are to go up 150 tags, bring up to 2807, which is about what I think we talked in previous meetings about making the juniors around 3,000-ish, 2,800.
Yeah, typically if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Typically what we do is we look at previous year sales. The direction we've had in the past from the commission is that we try to meet the demand. There's a couple areas, in particular the rubies, where we typically have youth tags left over. So we try to meet the demand, and then add just a little bit to it. I think roughly it's about 6% over what last year's demand was in order to accommodate any potential increase in demand for this year.
So that if they did indeed apply for the areas that are easier to get as one of their choices, they've basically guaranteed a tag.
Yep, they're willing to go anywhere. There's always been tags available.
Okay. And let's see, we've got the antlered, which that's what the total overall antlered increase. And I see some fairly more than significant increases here. Where'd you have, see, we had total numbers on that somewhere, didn't we?
Yeah, the total that you may have on
Yeah.
your 1331 hunt might be 9,999.
Yes.
Yeah?
There was an additional hunt that was added. It was an early-late split and a new hunt, and the formula did not take that cell in. Basically, the first formula, the 122 recommended for 011 through 013, wasn't added into that. So once you add that in, it makes the new recommended total 10,121.
Do we have any other typos?
Yes, it's not necessarily a typo,
Sure.
but not on that hunt, but it is on a deer hunt. If you want
Okay.
it now, I can give it to you now, or if you want
Yes,
to wait
please.
till we get there.
Wait, let me ask this.
Okay, go ahead.
The numbers that are in the columns are correct?
Yes.
It's just the bottom line?
That's correct.
Okay, yeah, let's go over any corrections you got.
Okay, the other correction pertains to the resident,
Page 18.
page 18. If you look at the 2010 quota column off to the right, that's actually 2009 quotas. The one that's, actually you updated that, but that's not it, is it?
Hang on.
We have it. We have an updated table with the 2010 quotas. It's a link to a table, and that link is still linking it to the 09 data.
I don't have it.
But we've got the 10 ones.
But the ones we're looking at, Tony, the ones we're looking at here
Yeah,
are
and that's the
09?
only one where that's the case.
2009.
Those are 2009 quotas. The 2010 ones are up on the screen.
okay.
Which hunt is that?
It's 1341.
Okay.
So that's, we don't have printout of the 10, do we? Not a printout for somewhere of that, or, 'cause that's a very significant hunt. That's, what's the total number of, in 2010 quota?
2130.
2130?
Just 80 tags, 90 tags.
Yeah, see, he's,
Okay.
okay, this is 2.
Anything else we got?
Nope.
This is the number for 2010.
All right, let's hear public comment on mule deer. Cards got lost, so come on up. See him over there, Bird. Come on up.
Shane Boren, White Pine County Cab. I'll start out with hunt 1331, unit 111 early and 111 late. The department shows an overall, all of my figures that I'm going to give you on population estimates come from table 22, page 847 in the back of the big book. They show a population estimate that's 500 animals lower than last year. There were no fall surveys in Area 11 early. And they're asking for a 6% increase in tags. We can't support an increase in tags with a population that's losing 9.7%. 114, 115 early shows population estimate of 200 less than last year, a loss of 10% on population. No fall survey, so we don't have a new buck to doe ratio. So we wanted to cut on the late season in there, cut it back to a 90-10, roughly 90-10 split, cut it back to 7 tags. Area 12 early.
Which units group?
114, that was 114, 115. Was the
Late,
second.
late,
That was the late hunt, yes. We went with the department's recommendation on the early hunt.
The 62.
Yes. Area 121 shows, again in table 22, shows 0 population growth compared to last year, and a buck to doe ratio on the fall fly of 20 bucks per 100 does. And they're asking for a 16% increase in tags. We would like to hold that with no population growth at 171, the same as it was last year. The quota was last year. Area 13 early. The survey shows a 200 deer increase over last year, which is 6.7%, and the fall survey shows 27 to 100 buck to doe ratio. We do support a slight increase, but we don't support an increase of 40% in buck tags in 1 year. Area 22. The survey shows a population decline of 400 animals. If you go with table 22, if you read Mike Scott's information, he shows a population of 4,000, which is actually a 900 animal decrease from last year. There was no fall survey, so with those two figures, we wanted to cut it back below last year to 390. I did talk to Corey Lytle from Lincoln County Cab, and they voted for a quota of 450.
Thank you very much for the public comment. Mr. Flowers.
Rex Flowers, Washoe County Cab. This year, they split the hunts in northern Washoe, and when it was done, it was the caveat at the season setting was that it was requested to split it and have an 80-20 split up there on quotas. So on 014 early and 0148, we'd like to make that an 80-20 split, which means taking it from 65 tags in the early season, making it 68, and in the late season going from 20 tags to 17. In the other part of that unit, it is an 80-20, so there's no change needed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. What else do we have? Public comment. Come on up.
Joe Krim, Persian Cab. We only had one concern, and that was in the unit 041042. The department wanted to raise the tags to 38 in that unit. Well, we'd like to keep it at last year's level, which was 34. So just drop it back 4 tags. Those deer are on a recovery in that area. They've been down for years, so we'd like to cut it back just a little bit to try to help that out.
All right, how have you been seeing the population up there? I haven't been up there.
You know, there's deer in there, but there's not a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that Mike might say something different than me, but it's just that's a big area. There's not that many deer in there. So if we cut it back a little bit, maybe give them a little better chance. Maybe. Yeah. It's a good thinking anyway. The process is right. We'll see if it works.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. More public comment. What do we got? Go ahead, and then we'll have Mr. Gardner be next.
Glenn Bunch, Mineral County. Are we just doing 1331?
All deer.
All deer. Okay.
Everything deer.
Okay, in resident mule deer muzzleloader hunt 1371, Mineral County would like an increase in unit 202, 205, and 206 from 2 to 4 tags. And in resident mule deer antlered archery 1341, we'd like an increase in unit 202, 205, 206 from 7 to 9, please.
And that's based on reasoning?
Well, the deer are there. The season is running a little late, and success is way down, and we don't see a problem. The biologist didn't have a problem with it, moving it up a couple.
What was the figure you put?
Gotcha. What was the figure?
9.
9.
7. Go from 7 to 9.
Okay. Come on up, Mr. Gardner.
Walt Gardner for the record. I'm glad to see that somebody's acknowledging our deer herd is going downhill. It was just a couple years ago we were told that there was more deer on the rubies than ever been counted before. Personally, it's the lowest deer numbers I've ever seen in my life. I grew up in Ruby Valley, started hunting before I was old enough to hunt. I was going with my dad. I've never seen this low numbers. In the 80s, there was more deer, and the department was giving out 500 tags on the rubies. Last year, they gave out 2707. This year, they want to increase it. I think we need to cut it by 50%. If we want to get these deer numbers back, we got to get serious and we got to get drastic. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. More public comment. Come on up, and then you're next.
Good afternoon. Brett Jefferson with Nevada Bighorns Unlimited. 1 lion kills 1 deer per week, or 52 deer per year. That is the mantra that this commission has functioned by for the last 5 years. If that is true, the study in Area 014 that has cost Nevada sportsmen $500,000 and has resulted in the killing of 31 lions and 812 coyotes since its inception should have dramatically increased mule deer numbers. $500,000 for 31 dead lions and 812 dead coyotes. That's almost $600 per dead animal. It would appear the commission's measure of success has clearly been the number of dead animals and not the number of mule deer added. If we look at just the effect of the 31 dead lions based on your calculations of 1 lion kills 52 deer per year, then where are the deer that these dead lions clearly did not kill? By your math, we should have well over 3,000 mule deer in 014 and an abundance of tags everywhere available for sportsmen. Yet current herd estimates remain at 1,400 deer. And the rumor is now that you want to decrease tags below the NDOW biologists have recommended. This clearly does not justify the expense of hard-earned sportsmen's dollars you are in charge to care for. Projects 14 and 15, coyote removal for deer enhancement, a study completed in 2009 by Kevin Lansford, and your top choice to the governor to become director of NDOW, had the following conclusions. Despite heavy killing of coyotes, coyote pup to female ratios tripled in response to the onslaught. That's nothing new. Biologists have long known that when coyotes are killed, litter sizes increase in surviving females. 1,124 coyotes were killed over the 5-year study in this area, and Mr. Lansford's final analysis is, and I quote, "The results of predator removal in GMUs 222 and 231 appear to have minimal effect on the population structure of mule deer in those respective units. You have spent a lot of money, killed a tremendous number of predators, but the common theme remains: no significant impact on mule deer populations. Even in areas where predator control has shown slight increases in deer numbers, there has been a corresponding slight increase in deer numbers in adjacent units that have received no benefit from the same predator control strategy. Is it now possible for this commission to admit that perhaps predators are not the only factor contributing to deer herd dynamics? It is time for this commission to consider that college-educated biologists hired by NDOW that spend countless hours in the field might just know a little bit more about how to manage our wildlife than a board of appointees. This commission needs to be accountable for the money and the time you have wasted. Our sportsmen demand nothing less. If you decrease mule deer tags beyond NDOW recommendations, you are further penalizing the sportsmen whose dollars have funded these predator-killing follies. We urge you to allow trained NDOW professional biologists to set quotas and that you not significantly change their recommendations. Thank you.
Come on up.
For the record, Michael Gerard for Humboldt County Advisory Board. In Unit 035 for Hunt 1331, actually for all antlered hunts, We'd like to keep the quotas of what they were last year.
Tell us about that.
In the survey data in the book here provided by Endow,
035. President,
it says, it's kind of contradictory. It says that there was a total of 800 deer classified, which is above the 2009 of 500 deer, but then in the final sentence it says both buck and fawn ratios were slightly down from the past 5-year average. So we feel that there's not enough deer out there to substantiate these increases in tags.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Wow. It's true, isn't it? Okay. More public comment. Public comment. Glenn Bunch. Mineral County.
For the record, Glenn Bunch, a clarification on that 1341 hunt. That's the late season. There's 2 seasons, an early and a late. And the late's the one that I want to take from 7 to 9.
1341. 1341. Okay, which units groups?
202, 205, and 206.
Okay.
There's an early and a late. It's at the top of the page, and the late one's the one I want to change.
Okay. That's what I got for now. Mr. Dixon.
You look excited, Scott.
I am excited.
For the record, Paul Dixon. I just like to state for this commission, you guys have been talking about mule deer, and for 4 of the commissioners on here, this is potentially your last meeting. Governor will appoint 4 new commissioners coming in June. And with that legacy, I think you guys want to leave the right legacy. If you don't come back, or if you do come back to a legacy where public respects the decisions you're going to make here today. And I would strongly urge you to very judiciously look at and listen to some of the recommendations you've heard from CABs. And if you look at the CABs overall, they've made minor changes to the recommendations by our professional biologists. And I think we need to respect those recommendations. And all eyes besides the eyes that are sitting here today are going to be on these decisions, and it will impact future decisions of who gets replaced onto this commission and who stays on this commission long term. I can guarantee you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Governor. The only person I know who could make that. Next. All right. Any further public comment? Once, twice. End the public hearing on this matter. All right, got a lot of information. You know, throw out a couple things. I know I'm sitting here looking at this data, and I've been looking at it for a couple weeks now since I got this pamphlet here and this book, and even here, population estimates in many areas are going down or flat, and tags are going up. And that's, well, it's not quite universal, just it's very close to universally going up. I'm just struggling with
I'd be more than happy to
information.
I'd be more than happy to
Wasley.
explain how that can happen. I provided the vice chairman and a couple of the commissioners that were on the Heritage Committee some graphs. I hope, yep, exactly those. So if you look through those graphs, and I think most of the county advisory boards have those as well, what you'll see is an increasing trend in your buck ratio. And we've had a number of comparisons today with percentage of population change with percentage of change in the recommended quota. And it's really important to recognize that this isn't a linear relationship or a one-to-one relationship. What we do is we start with this quota setting process with a post-hunt buck ratio objective. We have an objective, a buck ratio that we hope to arrive at the conclusion of the hunt. What happens is as that buck ratio continues to climb, because we introduce more and more conservatism into this process, you're going to see those quota recommendations go up to keep it where biologically we believe it should be. So even though the population may be decreasing, the recommended quota may go up because it's intended to keep that population, the buck ratio in that population, within a healthy range. So they're not one-to-one and they're not linear. So the direction and magnitude can be totally independent.
Question on these charts is they say the second half of them all is spring fawns per 100 does. How do you come about that ratio?
you subtract the bucks from the fall. It's a modeled buck ratio in the fall. So you simply look at the number of adults, you classify adults, and from those adults, you subtract your buck segment.
But this is spring, so you've got a sample. I mean, in the spring, your spring count is you got number of fawns per 100 adults is what your count.
You're classifying, right?
You're
but
classifying.
you have a model. You have observed buck ratios. You have modeled buck ratios. You know what proportion of your population has males and females, and so with some simple arithmetic, you can subtract the males from that to generate a ratio per 100 does.
But that's, I mean,
that's your recruitment. See, as that buck ratio goes up through time, if you continue to express your production or your recruitment as fawns per 100 does, and you're 100 adults, and you're changing the proportion of your adults that are male and female, then it's comparing apples and oranges. It's not giving you a true measure of your reproductive capacity of your population. It needs to be expressed as does, because then you can begin to answer questions of reproductive fitness and success in those animals. When it's always adults, and through a 30-year history or 25-year history like those graphs show, when you have significant changes in the proportion of your adult population that are male and female, it's apples and oranges. You're comparing the productive potential of does, 20 years ago with does today, but you're combining your bucks in there, and it's not giving you an accurate answer or the most accurate answer you could get. You follow me?
Oh, I'm following.
I just had a question on that.
Go ahead, Mr. Vice Chairman.
You know, if you count the number of adults and fawns in the spring, you can't tell the bucks, but therefore you're estimating the number of does because you can't tell, and you're taking the fall percentage of bucks and you use them in the spring of next year. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you've got an error. I mean, you're not taking into account winter loss, you're not taking into account accidents, and you're assuming equal winter mortality, and I think you have more mortality on does than you do bucks.
The best science demonstrates fixed adult survivorship in models, and mathematically verified models from Colorado have substantiated that with ground truth data with collars. We're working on the exact same thing right now. We've got 250 collars on mule deer to measure that exact same thing in Nevada.
There's a big chance of error there.
Multiplied twice. Okay, Commissioner Macbeth.
So every fall we count the bucks, right? And we determine those percentages. And so
in most areas, yes.
Yeah.
But
over time, what you're talking about is counting those bucks, and so what is the variation in those percentages that you see on average?
Well, it's going to vary in the smaller units where you have a really small sample size. You have a much larger confidence interval. We don't feel nearly as comfortable about some of the smaller, isolated. We've seen a trend in the western part of the state where we've taken what were 4 and 5 unit groups and broken them smaller and smaller so that we can manage hunters more carefully in those areas. And so in some instances we might only survey 150 to 200 animals, in which case we don't have a high degree of confidence in those samples. However, when we classify 10,000 animals in the rubies, we have a high degree of confidence. So the percentage of error in those buck ratios, if the survey is done at the best time of year, peak of rut, good snow, good light condition, we believe that we're within a few bucks one way or another. The science and our data support that.
And if there were a big event, an event, it would show up in the next fall's buck ratio, right?
Yeah, it would show up probably in hunter success, point class, and the next year's buck ratio. We have several checks built in. Okay, and so over time those percentages have stayed fairly constant? Absolutely, and I think that you can look at those graphs and you can see how those buck ratios have come up. They've climbed. We haven't had these dips where we've what happens is, we look at sources of mortality. We tend to take human biology and extrapolate it onto wild animals every day, and we look at ourselves where we don't experience a lot of environmentally caused mortality. We don't have a lot of starvation, a lot of freezing to death. So we look at controlling mortality on mule deer, and the two most tangible sources of mortality for most people are hunter harvest and predators. And we put a lot of time and energy into controlling those things with the assumption that it's going to result in an increase in the population. So commensurately, we see this steady increase in buck ratios. But as those buck ratios have increased, substantially over the last 30 years, we haven't been able to affect a population level change as a result of saving more bucks. And biologically, it makes sense. If your population isn't growing, adding more bucks to it isn't going to give you more offspring unless you're truly limited by the male segment. But running 35 to 40 bucks per 100 does, we know that's biologically not accurate.
And Commissioner Lint made the comment that it was just an estimate. Isn't in fact everything we're doing an estimate in one fashion or another?
Yeah, absolutely. Even a U.S. population census, which is supposed to be a true census, is really just an estimate.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Capurro.
I have a question, and then I have a pose something here. For either Mr. Cox, primarily Mr. Cox, because I think you've been here longer than Tony has. Have conditions of the deer herd populations changed significantly in the last 7 years?
The condition of the animals or the habitat?
The population.
The population size?
Yes.
You know, we've been bouncing around, I think, like 106, 107.
It's been pretty static for the last 7 years. I'd say that the variation that we've seen in our published population estimate for the last 7 years is within, you know, a confidence interval. I don't think we've made a significant increase or decrease in the last 7 years.
It was 105 in 04, 107 and 5, 110 and 6, 114, 108, 106.
Wait, give me those again.
It's on page A51 of your status book.
Okay, read them to me, though, please.
2004 was 105,000.
Okay.
2005 was 107,000.
Okay.
2006 was 110,000.
All right.
2007 was 114,000.
All right.
2008 was 108,000.
Okay.
2009, 106,000. 2010, 107. And then this year is estimated at 109.
Okay.
Very small changes.
I ran across something that was posted by the Nevada Division of Wildlife on May 13th, 04. And I'd like to read part of it, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
The Nevada Department of Wildlife has announced that it is proposing modest increases in the number of tags that will be awarded for most of Nevada's 2004 big game hunts. Mike Cox, NDOW staff biologist, said there is generally a positive outlook for big game populations in the state, with the notable exception of mule deer. The deer, and there's a quote from you, the deer population took a nosedive more than a decade ago, and it has showed no signs of rebounding. Following extensive aerial surveys that were wrapped up several weeks ago, NDOW biologists are recommending that 9,124 deer tags be issued to resident hunters for general rifle, corresponding to the 10,000, whatever, 100 that we're talking about here. This is an increase of more than 900 tags in the state's most recent deer hunt. Again, quoting you, deer herds are still flatlined. Our fawn crop is the same as it has been the past 2 years. It's pretty poor, actually, in relation to what we feel we need in order to grow deer, said Cox. My concern is that obviously just in the numbers and in looking at some of the information we've been provided, that we've relatively just bumped along. There have been a couple of years where it bumped up a hair and then immediately fell down beyond that. So we're not growing the herd. And there's got to be a number of reasons why. Habitat obviously is one, drought is another, predation is certainly involved in there too, and the like. But for some reason or other, as you indicated, for the past decade, which would have put it back to 94, and I would agree with you on that. In looking at the numbers, they've been pretty static pretty much going all the way back to 94. So we're not doing something right. To dramatically influence the population aspects. Now, you know, it's like anything else. Certain number of bucks are going to be born in relation to does each year. That's not going to vary very much. The survivability is an issue that is a little bit less certain, but what I can say is this. I have had many people ask me what we're doing by continuing to increase. Now, that year you issued, according to the article, 9,124 buck deer tags, even though you admit that the population has been flatlined and had taken a nosedive and had pretty much flatlined. Now we're looking at a recommendation with, in 04 you had a population of 105 estimate, and you're saying that the population estimate for this year is 109, that we are going up to 10,121 tags. You know, I hear your argument that harvest doesn't necessarily by itself determine, you know, how well your deer herd is going to progress. But I have to tell you that there are a whole lot of people out there that just do not believe that. And they are concerned enough that they have indicated to me, at least, that we need to do something more than just automatically start to kick up the tags. We've got, even by your own figures, we have a growth from last year to this year, an estimated growth of 1.8%, but we're going to issue 10.3% more tags. And we've done that throughout, including this 2004 article. At some point in time, I think we got to stop doing that. And that may not be popular with a lot of people, and I know I'm going to be told I'm not a biologist, but I can add and subtract. And I have hunted at least as many areas in this state as many other people in this room have, and scouted areas. I've seen areas that just, you know, used to teem with deer, that you have a hard time finding them now, and particularly up in the rubies, North Rubies. So, you know, I'm just saying to you that I don't know what's going to occur with respect to the proposed numbers that the department has thrown out here, but I think we're going to have to reduce them. And I think we're going to have to admit that we've got to take a different track someplace if we're going to regrow this herd. I was told by the guy who appointed me, who was admittedly no longer governor, but that was my charge when I was appointed, that he wanted to see results with respect to the deer, particularly deer in this state, because he felt that was our cash crop. And so, without further ado, that's my comments.
May I respond?
To you.
All right, give it one more shot, and then we'll.
I heard you. You can do math, yes, but again, and people just don't understand. Maybe they never will. That killing males who can't birth a fawn is doing nothing to the population growth or decline of a herd. I mean, talk to Hank, talk to Grant. You have to affect the female segment of a population, whether it's livestock or wildlife, to affect a change in the herd. And we have ample number of animals. Utah, Commissioner Lent was trying to say that Utah is the model for deer management. They're managing 15 bucks per 100 does. And there's no does that aren't getting bred. And we have 35 to 40. So killing bucks has no effect on the growth of the herd.
A few years back, at your recommendation, and I wasn't on the commission at that time, your recommendation was to add a hunt for approximately, what, 1,000 does?
987, but who's counting?
And so if we're not supposed to kill the baby producers, I guess the more I get into this,
we had the worst wildfire season.
All right.
Season for does on here.
All right.
So we need to stay on.
Let's
on the topic.
continue.
well, I wasn't the one that first brought it up.
Okay. Let's throw out a couple things here. I brought a few of these numbers up. I mentioned, off of this forum when I saw it and dragged it around to people, and I'm like, yeah, it's interesting. Area 14, about where I'm at, and Area 15, and and I talked to people, and hey, look, 215 tags last year in the early season. This year, 319. People are like, okay, you're kidding, or you've lost your mind, or they usually are. That's about as clean as they get. They get much worse than that. And then the Area 15, people have been hunting out there. I mean, you can almost get stoned for even referring to these increases from 176 to 293 when people are out there hunting, saying successful people. I mean, for example, just one example of many individual happens to have multiple degrees in wildlife biology that shot a very nice deer out there. Retired, has lots of time. Used to work for this department, in fact. And, knew out there, hunted 2 weeks or something like that, and, see 9 bucks and shot really nice deer. He's like, you want to increase deer? This is the lowest it's been in many decades. So, and that's what I keep hearing from all these people that have a whole lot more gray hair than I have, even though there's a few sneaking around the corners here. And, which tells me that there's a lot of wisdom behind those remarks, because they're out there every day. And how we can justify these is troubling, shall we say. Go ahead, Commissioner Cavan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too talk to a lot of people. I don't spend nearly the amount of time that I'd like to in the field, but the number of, I haven't talked to anybody that's particularly concerned about quotas. Everybody's concerned about the deer herd. Everybody would like to have more deer. But I do not hear a cry that some of the commissioners are talking about from the public to reduce the number of bucks that we kill. The cry, if there was one, should have came through the process from the county boards. And we heard that cry. And it's very minor. And I think we're going to consider that cry. I certainly am. But it's very, very minor. It's not substantial, and I think the people that are crying from the county boards should be heard. And I think we should look at their recommendations. We have some, but they're very minor. The biggest one I see here is to actually in 035 go from 74 to 36, but 36 was last year's number. I do not see any reason to get to throw up the alarm bells here. We can't manage populations by not killing bucks. And I may be wrong, but I've been out of the business for a long time. But if you reduce some of these bucks out of the populations, it could technically make room for more does, which is what we want. And I think that's a valid hypothesis. Maybe it's a hypothesis, but leaving bucks in there that are non-productive doesn't do any good. It's a renewable resource. We could lose those bucks through a hard winter in a certain unit or two, depending on how things go. They're there now. We can't bank them. If we do bank them, we're not doing our job. We should be harvesting the surplus that's out there. Thank you.
Fair enough. Oh, and I also wanted to throw up on that deal was there was a suggestion from Eureka County to reduce all proposed quota for all mule deer hunts in Area 14 by 10% out of Eureka County County Advisory Board. That's for all the assorted hunts on mule deer. I think that was a hint of what we're talking about. So, we have Commissioner Macbeth and Commissioner Vogler.
Commissioner Vogler first, go ahead.
Question. Are you still going to do a scientific study on the rubies on predation? Is that correct? Is that in the...
We are looking at cause-specific mortality. We're monitoring animals, collared animals, determining the rate of mortality and the cause of that mortality. So it's not just specific to predators, but we're trying to learn.
Predators, everything.
Everything, yeah.
And to respond to Mr. Cox, and also to those who say that nobody's complaining, the one thing that I've observed, non-scientifically of course, and many of the guides have non-scientifically observed, is foghorns and 3-points are dumb, and they're hanging around the does, and when you spook them out of a quakey patch or out of the brush, they run out and stop, and the foghorns and the 3-points are getting whacked. And also, a deer in good nutrition may be a 4-point when he's pretty young, just creates another horn, but it's the quality of bucks. Now, maybe that's only catering to the high-end guys that are all wanting one of those hanging on the wall. But that's what I see fewer and fewer. One of the greatest thrills is bringing those cattle out of the mountains in the wintertime when that rut's on, because them old boys are hid all summer, because they've been shot at enough that they go high. They don't hang around the does until that rut. And watch them fight and watch them little bucks trying to peel off 2 or 3 does and all that. It's like a circus. And you don't get to watch that anymore. And that's kind of in that vein what so many people have said, that they're all little young bucks. You don't see the quality. Now, everybody's at fault. Everybody's getting older. A little harder to climb up on that peak where them big old devils lay all summer long. But when they're not down there in the rut, they're not there. In those medium range to the upper end range of those bucks. And that seems to be the problem. But I will do my best to get you a good study on the rubies. Thank you.
Okay, let's see. Further comments? We had Commissioner Macbeth.
Seems that the facts indicate that at least over the last 7-10 years, the mule deer population has been stable, ups and downs, but stable. And I accept the explanation, and I now understand why you can harvest more bucks when the population may actually be decreasing a little bit from prior year. That seems like a short-term opportunity, taking advantage of older bucks that that are in the population, and I'm all about protecting the resource. And I don't even think we're anywhere near close on this buck harvest of impacting this resource whatsoever. And therefore, when I look at what has been presented, I want to maximize hunter opportunity, make sure the sportsman that I've represented as a sportsman representative, and which I would assume that all sportsmen's representatives would do, would be to make sure that that opportunity goes to our sportsmen. They deserve it. And qualified by the comments and positions that our cabs bring to us, I take that to heart. They deserve to be heard, and I don't think that any of the proposed adjustments by the cabs has any impact whatsoever on what the department has proposed, and so I would be willing to accept those. But anything further than that is hurting sportsmen, and I will not support it.
All right. When we're coming up here, we probably ought to take 1107 first, and maybe 1101.
You ready for a motion?
No.
A question here, and then we'll drag it up there.
I got a question, Mr. Chairman. Look, how does NDOW determine the quotas in units 241 to 244, 251 to 253, 261 to 268, 271 to 272, and 291?
Like
it
most
hasn't been
states,
surveyed in 10 years. How do you?
actually, like most states, since a lot of states don't have the luxury of a helicopter or a large deer to sample. So we just look at harvest success, and if that population or if that hunter success seems to be holding its own or slightly increasing, we'll throw a few tags in there. And if it's starting to drop, then we feel the hunters are telling us something. If everything is equal in terms of effort, and we'll reduce it. And there's really nothing else we can do, because it would take us days to classify even 50 deer, which is still, a minimal, too small of a sample to really get anything with confidence. So whether it's Esmeralda County, southern Nye County, and Clark County, we just simply look at harvest.
Well, there's 220 deer in there, those areas combined. And so you're using harvest information. I think that's bad science. Until you can really inventory them out there, you can't make any decisions. And I'd like to just comment, for a second, Mr. Chairman, that I've got one of the heritage projects that we had, and the department was against it. It was a scientific analysis by Mr. Maxim, and the department said, and I'm quoting, "Project appears to propose use of harvest level as an indicator of population size, neither accurate nor scientifically defensible." And yet you're saying we can do these 5 areas here with harvest data and defend it. That doesn't make sense, because you're on record saying that harvest data is just not scientific, and yet you're saying these areas you're doing that. And so if it's not scientific, we shouldn't have a quota in those areas, because we don't know what's in there. They haven't been inventoried for 10 years. I don't care if there's 1 or 2, but you've got 220 deer. That's a considerable amount of deer.
Well, I think that may have been taken out of context. He was probably looking to do that statewide.
That was the point I was going to make, is there's probably 2 issues there. One is how the data are being used, and one is to generate a quota, a very limited quota in some small areas where it's not cost effectively done to go in and perform a survey for 50 animals, and the other is to extrapolate harvest data as a sole source of a population estimate on a statewide level. So I think it's apples and oranges.
Doesn't say that.
I'd like to check a couple things here. One is a couple of these handouts here. Now, some of these are suggesting, and basically appears to be an inverse relationship between tags given out and harvest success. It's interesting. We got some population but that's what some of these charts we've seen. And then these here are showing population estimates. Actually, these are population estimates that are coming up. I was thinking of the other charts would come up. But the population estimates in many of these areas over time, we're showing a long-term decline, and that looks about right from the other stuff we've come up with in the past. This just happens to be in a graphical form, more like the commissioner had asked for some other times, but looks like it's the same data basically as on page, what is that, 51? But done by unit. I know I tried to do a little bit of that for a couple of the unit groups.
I can explain it when later on if you want me to.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
I asked for some information to try to get some population studies from data from the department, and I went back to 76 to the present and did some population trends. I'm going to show you the map. But I tried to get the data from the department, and I want to read, just to show you, the trouble I had. And I got an email back, and I got all these files, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and these files, I got 11 files back from the department and saying, here's the information you need. And it wasn't the information. It just totally wrong. And so I'm going to read a couple sentences in this email that I got back from Larry Gilbertson, and it said, perhaps I might suggest that perhaps although you have all the information you need to view the Area 14 deer population estimate, and this was in March, I wanted one area, you don't understand the model enough to know where to look. I only suggest this after spending more than 2 hours along with Deputy Director Haskins and yourself trying to explain our population estimate process to you, and then having read your misrepresentation in the Elko paper, which I don't know what he's talking about. But I did meet with him for 2 hours and trying to find out where I could do these population trends. Your failure to understand and comprehend what was already provided to you was also apparent when you state, if there is another spreadsheet that calculates the final population estimate, then this must be provided. There had to be another way where they had the information. If you look at the April POP worksheet, you'll see the population estimate numbers that are used in the quota calculation process. So he said, there it is. In fact, that sheet that I already sent you for Area 14 shows the total number of male and female fawns. And it was on to say, you can find all the survey data that was collected each year for big game in the annual big game herd condition and status reports that the department has published since the late 1950s. So I've been doing this since 1960, early 1960s, so I have most of them, and I had to dig them out, and I went back to them. And it says, I think it's important for you to move to more fully understand Nevada's big game population estimate and quota recommendation process. Well, I think I understand as well as anybody else, even some of the guys in the department. Then I got an email back, and what I did is I called them up and said, I took a look at the April POP spreadsheet and compared them to the 2010 final population numbers with the same number in 2009, 2010 hunt book, and they didn't match. They absolutely didn't match. And he told me that's where they get them, out of the hunt book. So I couldn't figure it out. And then he said, the final population April POP doesn't match the historical hunt book numbers. That's what I told him. So then I get an email back. In my email to Commissioner Lent, I said the numbers we used for the quota calculation were on the April POP worksheet. I was mistaken. So I mistakenly referred to April POP, thinking of August POP. I apologize for the slip. For mule deer, the September POP is one we use for quota calculation. So all that time I tried to find them, I couldn't find them, and he said, whoops, they're in another file. And by then I was going back through all the books. And, I just think it's like pulling teeth. And I never got the information. I had to go back my own, and I made these charts up. And I want to take a second on these charts. And this first one here with the green in the center, the green shows where the end owl population is increasing or holding steady. The red shows where the end owl population is decreasing. And the white is where no population estimates were done. And I just talked about that. And this is end owl population trends. So this is straight from the hunt books, because I couldn't believe their April POP. It didn't match, and now he said another file matched, and it was just totally confusing. So I just went back to the books, and the books I'm talking about are the hunt books like we got here. And so my son is a computer guru, and he's the one that, with I think Commissioner Cavan and Commissioner Curl, when we found that there was some problems with the draw system, and where anybody could get a tag without going through the process, he's the one that did it for the legislature. And so anyway, he did these for me. And so this one here is a big picture, and I call it the big picture graph. And it shows the peak was in 1988, and they said 200,000 deer. Well, that's not substantiated anywhere. I defy anyone to prove to me we had that many deer, because I don't think Nevada can hold that many deer. And so this shows the state of Nevada trends And I did a 5-year moving average to even it out. And you can see here that the population estimate has not increased, since 2002. We've had no increases in the thing, and maybe a slight decrease, a little bump upwards. So our deer population is relatively static. Now this comes right from the hunt book. Now if they got something else, I don't know where it's at, but this comes out from their own data. If you look at some of the graphs now, the graphs I did, I took each area except one, I think. And if you look at the black line shows a long-term linear trend. And if you look at area 1, 2, 3, and just every area there is. And then I blew up area 10 because I think it's an important area for mule deer. And it shows, and then I did, the blue dashed line is the 5-year moving average, which takes the bumps, the high bumps and peaks out, and gives you a little bit better picture of what's going on, I think. And statistically, it's valid. And if you look at the last page, area 10, the last 10 years in area 10 have been flat or maybe a slightly decreased, but there's been no improvement. And with no improvement, you cannot increase the harvest because man is a predator on these deer. And so it shows you, if you look, every single area is going down, and some of them are going down more than others.
Area 4 is not, sir. I'm not trying to interrupt you, but it shows kind of a trend down.
Yeah, there are some areas, and in this green area here, there are some areas that are going up or staying steady, and like 051, and so it shows you the big picture that we do not have an increasing deer population in the state, and we've got some areas in Elko, and I've talked to a lot of sportsmen out there, and they tell me there's no deer. There's just no deer, and this was a report that the NDOW gave to the legislature. And in 1988, we had 52,000 deer tags. In 94, we issued 17,000. And it's pathetic, and you can blame weather, you can blame predators, whatever you want to blame. But one of the things in here is an interesting statement. The Fish and Game Department failed to detect and react to a crashing deer population. So this can happen. I'm not saying they did, but this can happen. Mistakes can be made. And we've got to watch this. We can't just arbitrarily say, hey, we're right, because here's a case when they were wrong. And, and so we've got to be very careful. And one of my goals was to live long enough to see the deer come back. And I did some other graphing, and in area 10, the data shows a population's going down. The spring fawn doe adults is going down. Harvest is going down, and our success is going down. So why would you want to increase the tags? It just doesn't make sense. And when you look at some of the hunter success versus tags issued, the more tags you have issued, the success should go up because you have more deer out there, right? I mean, that's logical. But if more tags are issued and the success rate goes down, it's inversely, and that's what all these areas are that way, most of them. One of two things are happening. There's not enough deer out there, or the population estimate was not correct. Those are two things that can happen, in my opinion. And it just shows that most of the areas are going down, and these are the only areas that we have a stable population in the state. And if you look at their recommendations, they're recommending all this deer increase. I don't think that's justified.